You know, though, you're going to have a question with tone. You're going to have a question about mood. Also, when it comes to Lamb to the Slaughter, you're going to have questions with both situational and dramatic irony. So those would be things that you certainly do want to be well aware of and able to explain. What do we have overall for a definition of tone?
I'll say how to often makes a reader feel.
It's kind of like in the middle between the two. Devin, you were saying? Oh, so it's going to be the author's overall attitude in a story, or it could be something else, play, novel, poem. Novella, like we had with Metamorphosis. How does author go about creating tone?
Words.
Remember a vocab term?
Adjectives.
No, like specific word choice. Begins with a D.
Dictation.
Almost.
Diction.
Diction.
Awesome.
So diction, word choice would be something that allows a person to create an overall tone. So if you are trying to have like an eerie, mood, you might have some words, some tone that could have something like we have in the pedestrian. Shadows, tomb, ghost, gray, those kinds of terms end up being used. So it's the overall attitude that the author's trying to get across. Mood is similar to the author's attitude, but it's not what the author puts into the story, but it is what, Jillian? The feeling the reader gets. So Luke, I don't remember the way that you worded that first answer.
How to often makes a reader feel.
Okay, so in some ways, you could argue that's maybe more in the mood category because the feeling that you get, the emotion you get from reading the story, that's the mood. So if you are the author, the intended attitude is going to be the tone, what you're purposely trying to do, but the way that the reader feels is going to be a little bit different, where that's going to be the mood. So this would be the emotion or reaction that the reader feels from the text. Okay, so when you think of tone, the main term that should be coming to mind for you right away is going to be author. When it comes to mood, you would want to think of reader as the main thing. So the way the reader feels is going to be the mood. What the author's trying to do is the tone. Those two things should be pretty similar. Some cases, though, you'll have an issue where maybe the mood that you feel is different from what the hopeful tone was. At that point, you have maybe a little bit of a miscommunication taking place. So, mood of the pedestrian. What is then the mood that the reader's going to feel from it? Depressing, dreary. And those are two good terms. The ones that you want to stay away from, happy, sad, positive, negative, because they're too generic. Now, certainly this is not meant to be positive or happy, but for any kind of story, you don't want to say, ooh, that has a happy mood to it, because it's just too generic. Whereas depressing, dreary, we can tell that's in the negative connotation, but it's much more specific. What's the setting for the story? What's the setting? Well, okay, so Leonard's walking on the sidewalk. We know large city. Anyone recall, like, specific date?
2050.
Almost.
2040.
2053. You flipped it. So instead of 35, it's 53. And, Jacaz, you remember the month?
April.
November.
November.
Gang, I said that.
So, knowing that this is therefore in the future, what could something that we add to the overall mood if it's meant to be dreary, depressing, but it's in the future, therefore I'm kind of thinking of like an ode term. If this isn't in the all too distant future, not omniscient, close.
Obstacle.
Yeah.
Omnitive.
Ominous.
That's the same thing I said.
No, it's not. You said omniscient.
That's the same thing.
It's not.
Yes, it is.
What's an omniscient narrator? Narrator who knows everything. If something is ominous, that means that it is kind of like foretelling, spooky. You have some foreshadowing taking place. So this is in the future for Bradbury. It's ominous in the sense that the future does not look too good. And if you recall, in the notes that you were viewing online, if it's a futuristic story that has like a bleak kind of setting to it, it's referred to as a dystopia. Okay. Number 11, what aspect of human life concerns Bradbury the most? What is he most worried about? Ben? Okay. So if everyone is inside watching TV, then they are addicted, dependent, reliant on TV, and then that could filter down to other forms, certainly of technology. Because mentioning lazy, they're not walking out, but they're certainly just worried more about the technical aspect. So, aspect of human life that concerns Bradbury the most: people's dependency on technology. Television would be the main one that he certainly focuses on, but more thematically, you would be looking at technology as a whole. Were you able to get definitions for your vocab terms? No, Google wouldn't give me the definition for one.
It was really like, nah, you're wrong.
Did you come see Mr. King during homeroom where he has a book full of dictionaries that have words on them? No. Did you want Mr. Kane's Oxford English Dictionary where you need a magnifying glass to read a word because it has every word? No.
So I couldn't.
You came here anyway.
Who did?
What do you have, first period over in...
I was in here. Yeah. First period.
This is true, Adam showed up during homeroom, so if Adam can do it...
Yeah, that's Adam, not Luke. I'm scared of you, Mr. Kane.
I understand. What makes Leonard unusual? And if you're a writer, you can come up with different terms for it, but a lot of folks will like artistic. You're looking at creating something, whereas those who are dependent on technology, they're reacting to stuff. They're not creating it themselves. You want to read that one sentence that you wrote? Yeah, that's what I thought. What else makes him unusual? You folks mentioned the sidewalk. He walks. He takes walks on his own.
All the lights are on in this house. After he left, what is that? You're wasting electricity.
Something else that makes him unusual, his house is well lit because he does keep the lights on. Everyone else is kind of dark and has the TV. Remember, this is a part of the question. Detail about the sidewalk?
It's like not nice.
Broken, it's overgrown with the grass and weeds, so the whole idea would be if it's overgrown and broken down, chances are that probably it's not cared for because people don't use it. So the fact that he's walking around is what's going to make him most unusual for it. Significant about the setting of the short story. I know Luke's not going to offer his answer for this one.
I can do it now.
I
swear to
don't have
God.
an answer.
Should I let him go?
You let him
Just
do
to
it.
spite you?
I've
Ben wants me to let him
Wait,
go.
I have more done than Luke. See how much he has done. See how much I've done.
Let me see your
If I
face.
go all front and almost all back.
Yeah, because you're just
See,
copying
no, no,
down.
no.
You're just
You're
copying
comparing
down.
yourself to the lowest common denominator in the room, and you want to use that as like a gold star?
You're the lowest common denominator. Are you kidding me? In a room with Adam and Jock heads. Come on now, Mr. Kane.
So, man, Mr. King,
No.
can Luke go and then I go, please?
Maybe. We'll see.
No, like, please.
Setting. We already said 2053. Significance about it. But it's not...
Futuristic. Future's my dad.
2017, 2053. How far in advance is that?
It's like 40 years.
For you, it's like multiple lifetimes, but...
36.
36.
Years.
Now, at the time it's written, it's 100 years, because he writes it in like 1951, 102 years. But significance would be it's the not so distant future, which still makes it relatable. Now, of course, the scary thing, and we're going to be dealing with this when we get to Bradbury's book, Fahrenheit 451, people's dependency on technology is an overall concern that he has in the 1950s. If you take a look at 2017, we're dependent upon technology. And, certainly you not being able to find a word on Google is not unusual. People, so far as maps, directions, you rely on Google Maps or you rely on something else for it. Phone numbers, people don't remember because you just kind of end up looking onto contacts and whatnot. Luke, go to the restroom so Tommy has a chance to go
Thank you.
later on.
Luke, hurry up.
Nope. Taking my good old time.
One of the other things, and Luke did mention this in his answer, the city, big or small?
Small. Which one? Which story? Oh, it's you.
Large city means you're going to have a large population. If Leonard is the only one out there, what does the fact that this is a large city do compared to a small town that only maybe has a few people?
You might have nobody.
It emphasizes how, how empty civilization kind of would be, but it certainly emphasizes how unique or different he would be compared to other folks. If you were to say, Leonard's in a town of 10 people, he's the only one who takes a walk, that might not seem like a huge deal, but in a city that probably has millions of people, the fact that he is the only person who takes a walk, that's going to emphasize how different he is. He, of course, being Leonard. What does Leonard do in his walks? Let's take that first part. Walks. He moves.
Looks at people's windows.
Not like in that creepy, peering kind of way. Do you remember anything he does besides looking? He'll look, and then he also
Shouts in, hey, you in there?
he starts talking kind of like to himself, asking questions, wondering what they would be watching on TV. So in a way, it's kind of probably him almost making fun of them that they're not doing anything. So he's taking a walk, certainly, but also looks in and imagines what they watch and asks them questions. So looks in and imagines what they watch on TV and asks them questions. Describe the interaction with the police.
He said, yo, what you doing? He said, I'm out here working.
Who's talking to him?
There's nobody in the car.
Remember, it's like an automated police car. So we got like the driverless Uber cars, that could be kind of going around, the self-driving cars. This is an automated police car. There's not an actual person in there, and it's the only police car because everyone else in town stays within their houses. So, automated police car.
You're arrested.
For what?
Car asks him what his profession is. His response, he says.
Right.
Car's response?
No profession.
No profession. So it does not view writing being a profession. So you have this whole dialogue that he is a writer. Car's response, no profession. So the idea of art, creativity, creating something means absolutely nothing. Means zero. Nothing. Devin, where does he get taken to then? So he's taken to the Center for Regressive Tendencies. The key word in that is going to be regressive. Regressive, forward or backward, would be going backwards. So if you are a progressive thinker, P-R-O in front of it, you're moving forward. Regressive, you're going backwards. So the society would view the art form, the writing, taking walks, all that stuff as regressive. Progressive would be dealing with technology. So if it is regressive, it's looked at as basically being unneeded, out of date. Fancy word for that could be something like antiquated. It's an antique. So, like cassette tapes are antiquated. CDs are basically almost antiquated. Vinyl records would be antiquated at this point. Folks would argue a car that you have to wind the windows up and down would be antiquated. All right? All right, situational irony versus dramatic irony. What do we have for definitions for these two?
Situational irony is
And we mentioned with the S where you think of S, think of surprise.
Surprise!
It's a surprise to everyone, characters and reader, especially the reader. So what is probably the most well-known example of situational irony that occurs in Lamb to the Slaughter? Takes the leg of lamb, murders her husband. That's not something you would expect based on the beginning of the story where she seems to love her husband so much. Dramatic irony, remember we talk about this quite a bit with Oedipus Rex, with drama. Dramatic irony, it's a surprise to a character, possibly, but it's certainly not a surprise to the reader. The reader knows something that characters do not. What do the police officers do for Mary Maloney at the end of the story? Eat the leg of lamb. We know they're not just eating the lamb, but they're also eating the murder weapon. Anyone remember the Detective Noonan's closing line? I bet the murder weapon is right under our noses, and it literally is as they are eating the leg of lamb.
Wouldn't that be something?
How does Patrick upset Mary? He wants a,
Divorce.
and she is.
Very upset. Records. That might be the reason, or the fact that he cheated on her.
He wants a divorce when she is pregnant. No reason to believe extramarital affairs or anything with the story.
Or he killed someone. Yeah.
Sam the grocer, significant character because he provides
Alibi.
an alibi. Thank you for raising your hand, Ben.
I remember reading my hand off class the first time.
This is important, that alibi with reaction to Mary's story. What are the police thinking? What's their reaction to her story? After listening to the story, they decide that, yeah, it would basically be impossible because you can listen into the conversation that they're having where they say she can't be the suspect. Initially, she would be the first suspect. After they get the alibi, they listen to her tell the story, then they decide it has to be somebody else. But initially, she would be the suspect. Then they decide it's impossible that she could have done it. So after being a suspect, the police decide it is quote-unquote impossible that Mary could be the murderer. You could certainly say this is also an example of dramatic irony because we know she is the murderer even though the police do not. What type of weapon are the police looking for? Something that would be large, heavy. One of the things that they guess specifically could be something, they say then like a spanner, which is S-P-A-N-N-E-R, and a spanner specifically is a wrench. So like a large wrench. Like lead pipe, pipe gets thrown around, things like that. I don't believe it's a specific form of a wrench. I think because this is British, I think it's just a British term for like a wrench. Overall mood, Lamb to the Slaughter. So what is the reaction that we get from it?
Surprise.
Surprising. suspenseful. And I think you also could say the fact that she gets away with it, murder weapon being cooked, police eat it, that a lot of folks would kind of say there's some dark humor to it. It's kind of meant to be a funny, eerie story in a little bit of a way. So tomorrow, multiple choice, little short answer. Look over the 2 short stories, the active reading, those would be good things to think. Do you have active reading?
I'm not even shut up the class, Luke.
It was like this, but it was for random slaughter. Because you shy and Phil didn't work. That being their own section for like this, it would just be like lumpy envelope. Not like the driver. See,
It's probably
but yeah, it's, it looks just like that other one.